Record. Mic trigger.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of the Beans World Show. And we have Tom Machanhill with. You sure do. But before we do get into the episode, we have the shout-outs. And a super shout-out goes to Tech World. If you don't know what he's about, go and check his channel. It is really cool. If you like toy laptops, if you like VTech, if you like sarcastic reviews, if you like someone that takes the rip out of technology and AI and slop, and also just really, really cool stuff in between, then check that channel, because that's what that channel's about. And also, it's just a really, really cool channel, and it's changing every day, or every other day. Anyway, who cares about that? Because you should go and check it out if you really want to. It's not my channel, it's his channel. And yeah. So we got Tom Machanhill with us today. And Tom Machanhill is going to tell us some stories now of the bittersweet days of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, and I think a lot of people have been asking for a lot of nitty gritty,
Dark stuff.
So I'm going to give it to the people. And I'm going to tell you about the story about Mick Rogers, who was a policeman at a police station. He was a dodgy policeman. He was the dodgiest of the dodgiest. And when you obviously police that abuse their powers. Well, this guy was buying guns and drugs. But I got to know him because I bought cars off him in the early 90s. I only bought a couple of cars off him. And then in the early 2000s, when I sold a car, because I'd sold, it was like getting rid of a car. I knew he could get rid of a car pretty easily. And he drove fast cars. Now, what I didn't know was he was using his vehicles to get his errands done and also to use as weapons. But they were used countless times as weapons. They were used countless times for getting stuff to other people. And they were also used countless times to get things done. But this story is set in circa 95, 96. And this was on the knockoff shift. So it was on the night shift. And when he was on, he had friends down on the control room. So if something was going to be done dodgy at the police station, they would taper off the control room. And on this same night, there'd been a murder. Now, what would happen when there was like a serious allegation, like a murder or something? They would call the control room. and there were two control rooms. There were two 999 control rooms. And on both 999 control rooms, they were tapered off, so they couldn't get to the police station. But there was a guy on in Birkdale that knew exactly what was going on. And so I was called, and he said, there's a guy, he's going to come to the police station, and he's going to be pretend to be one of us. He's going to fake this thing. And he said, we're going to take an undercover cop car, right? Because if they take an undercover cop car, you know, they can't get anything on you because, you know, it's an unmarked car. He said, and what I'll do, he says, I'll call the 999, I'll call the 999 thing off, so basically we can get through. And he says, oh, my mate will come through on a police motorcycle and he'll escort you. He said, but when he sounds a siren, he's going to go through first, and then when he comes back, he's not going to have the siren, right? And he says, we've got to go up to whatever it is. And he says, when you go there, he says, you're going to go to a farm up in, I'm trying to think, it was on the way to Ormskirk. Farm on the way to Ormskirk. And he said, you're going to drop some drugs off. Mainly it was marijuana. In exchange for magic mushrooms. And he said, you can take 0.5 gram. He says, if the job goes well, you can take 0.5 gram of mushrooms along with whatever it is, right? Oh yeah, and you can take a shot of heroin. Now at the time, I only did steroids. I never did anything. I never did any heroin because at that time, I knew, I kind of wasn't sure. I was a bit kind of ummy and ahhry with heroin. It was when they started, it was sort of, people weren't lacing it too much, but it was getting laced in clubs and stuff, so we knew to stay away with it. But what we didn't know was that people were lacing steroids with heroin. That's how people got onto heroin, because they were lacing the steroids. And there was what I also knew was this guy that was growing the marijuana up at this farm in Ormskirk. He knew of a guy who I would later then get acid off. And it was the proper acid. None of this shite you get nowadays. It was the real hardcore acid. In fact, this acid had come all the way from Jamaica. Sorry, not Jamaica, Colombia. The acid had come over from Colombia, and the cocaine had come over from Jamaica. And this guy was getting, all this cocaine. But this guy was also getting real opiates, real raw, live opium, they called it. And it was real, strong opium, which, anyway. And so this police officer, Mick, the police officer, he was getting it. But what I didn't know was, all the drugs I was getting him, he was selling to all of his mates for cheap. So I stopped doing it then, because I thought, he's being an arse. But anyway. So everything comes into the equation, the drugs and everything. And I was to go and do a pickup in an unmarked police car. Sorry, no, I wasn't going in an unmarked police car. I was going in my own car, and then we were going to take. No, that was it. Because I was selling this car, but that was the very next day because he was going to take this car for a test drive. He was going to drop the car at the Birkdale police station and take this car, my car, for a spin. Now, this does happen, but the shit hits the fan on the same night. So just remember all that, basically. So it all goes Pete Tong, and it basically starts where I'm driving to. I'd got to the police station, and then I followed this guy up to Ormskirk. Oh, so no, I was driving the a marked police car because we left the car, and then he was gonna come and pick me up at the police station in Birkdale, and I was gonna get him, and we were gonna whatever. However, we were gonna park the car at the police station. I was going to load the gear into my car, and he was going to test drive it, and then we were going to take it back up, and then we were going to do a deal, and I was going to buy this brand new car. Well, I never got to buy the brand new car because, well, for first and foremost, we're driving along up to Ormskirk, right? In the dark. I think it was about 8:30, 9:30 at night. And the police radio is in the car, and it's going, blah, 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 Sierra, Oscar, Tango, whatever it is. Are you copying? There's been blah, blah, blah. There was there'd been a girl that had been murdered. She'd been murdered in a house just on the edge of, it was in Formby. It was a domestic, but she'd been brutally stabbed. She'd been brutally stabbed, and then she'd been tortured. The daughter, she just had third-degree burns. She was nearly killed. They just poured petrol on the daughter, but they murdered the wife. But she was tortured. The wife was, or the girlfriend, whoever she was tortured. They had her fingernails and her teeth pulled out. Oh my gosh. Beaten over the head. And the next thing, she was knifed and raped, and it was horrible, basically. There was blood coming out of everywhere. And anyway, the forensics were there. The paramedics, the social services, everything. And they were trying to get the police there. They could not. The ambulance was 6 hours after this murder, by the way. The forensics, they were already there. The team of forensics, but they were trying to get the police there. But nobody could get there. They got the forensics on a mobile phone. So the forensics were there, right? They had to arrest the husband. They couldn't get the police there because the control rooms were tapered off. They couldn't even get a helicopter there, so they tried getting a helicopter there, but you couldn't get anything there because they couldn't radio the control room because the radios were off. Right? But there was a guy on Birkdale, and he managed to get down to the police station in town, or at the other end. I think it was the other end of Churchtown. This police station. And there was a guy, he'd run out of the prison. You know, not the prison. He'd come from I think they were doing something else from the Crown Court. Not the Crown Court, the whatever is it? The Magistrate Court. And he came from there, and he jumped in a prison van and raced up to the police station and said, oh, there's a problem. So they had to get the guy from Birkdale, and he had to do it down. And he was doing all of the 999 calls from Birkdale, and he was really, really pissed off. And he was ringing Birkdale control room, and then everyone was radioing. But they managed to get to us. They managed to radio us. We couldn't fob them off the channel because they knew, because you couldn't do that. Like, oh, Sierra Oscar, Whiskey Tango, Sierra Charlie. Each time you kept bringing them down and go, oh yes, we're in operation, we're on another call, you need to blah, blah. Well, this is an emergency kind of thing. And, oh yeah, but, in an unmarked police car, you go into an emergency in an unmarked police car, this guy in Birkdale knew there was something wrong immediately. Now, bear in mind, we're driving up in the dark, and I didn't know where I'm going, and this guy's in the other car, and by the way, I'm with this other guy who's supposed to know where he's going, and he's like, right, okay. So he says, then when we got to Ormskirk, and we get to this farmhouse, and it's all in the dark. And the guy's going, oh yeah, I've got the drugs, blah, 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 it's all fresh, blah, blah, blah. He says, but we're going to have to wait for the plug. Oh, hang on. Yeah, you're going to have to wait for the plug because there's a plug coming, and he's taking this amount, and he says, you're after your 50 grams of mushrooms, aren't you? I said, I'm taking half a gram if he can get his 10 grams or 30 grams. He says, oh, no. He says, you can only take 20 grams. I only got 15 grams of mushrooms, by the way, out of that. Which, again, and I didn't do them till the following night because, well, as you know, so we're waiting for this plug who's on a moped, right? And by the way, he knows he's going to get pulled because there's police around, but what he doesn't know is the police are us because we're on this pretend 999 call. We're on this fake 999 call. Faking an emergency. Yada, 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 we're faking an emergency. So obviously that's how it goes. That's how it plays out. We're on an emergency. We're on a 999 call. And anyway, he said, oh yeah, we're going to have to wait for the plug to come. The plug does come eventually because the guys on the police bikes, they're sort of saying, oh yeah, well, follow us, and they do lead him to the farm. And he's a bit of a shit plug anyway because he's squatting down, and instead of unplugging it, he's farting it all over the place. So there's feces all over the bag, and he's replugging the bag and all the rest of it. And he's doing the deal, and he's like, yeah, lads, and I'm picking up like half what he's got, and I see 1,000 quid. No, I see 200 quid. So I take 200 quid, and I says, yeah, I'll take this. And I said, I'll split it. 1,500 quid's ours, right? Which in those days was quite a lot. I'll split each ways, right? Because anyway. And I said, right. But this guy, this plug, knew where 6 grand worth of marijuana was. And so did we. Right? Because we were also sitting on a gold mine, because halfway up the road was a crack factory. It was actually an abandoned cottage, I think, if memory serves me right. It was all boarded up, but we knew there was stuff growing in there. And we thought, well, we're police. If we knew people on the forensics, so I just said, do you know any forensics? To Mick, and he goes, oh yeah, I know this person and this person. I said, well, right, get them in. And there we go. We're sitting on a gold mine, and get 6 guns of weed out. But the guy on the farm said, you don't want to be fucking around with forensics to get them in. He says, if you want any, he said, if you want any shit, you'll get it off me, because I can get in there. He says, I know the lads get in there. So this plug was basically, he was a all mouth and trousers, basically, because when we did get in there, which was like 4 weeks after that, we only lay our hands on 2 grand's worth, because the 6 grand's worth, well, people had got in there and took about 4 or 5 grand's worth. There wasn't just weed in there, there was cocaine, and it was like the shittest of the shittest. It's like the shit stuff you get in anyway. And it was all, wasn't all the prop. We knew it was all, because we did test stuff. We didn't just, we were the proper group. No, even the dickheads didn't. The dickheads never tested anything, but the dickheads knew, right, well, because they would then take it, and they knew they were not going to, it's not like today where the dickheads take it, the dickheads fuck off and take it. It's not like that. It wasn't like that then. It was, you got drugs, fine. You got weapons, fine. And and this guy, he knew people. Because obviously he knew people because they were using his farm. He knew where the weapons were. There were people here hiding weapons. If they were, he knew where the guns and the knives, he knew where they were. And they were hidden. I mean, that was the farm that Paul Ogar was using for a while to hide his ammunition. Because Paul Ogar, he wouldn't put guns and ammo on the same place. Not like some people. We knew where the guns and the ammo was. Well, anyway, that's another story for another day. But so obviously, and a lot of other people are turning up, and they're all after this plug because he's effing up basically with the money. He's just given, he's just like, give and take kind of thing. So like, you're not screwing us up kind of thing. So there was a kind of a bit of a kerfuffle because the plug had screwed up, and I think we were about to screw up. So I said, just get out the way. So we pushed the plug to the floor, and we let the other lads deal with him. And we also knew there was a prostitute up the road he was trying to get back to. What, the plug? Yeah, well, he had a prostitute up the road. This is why he was going on about this, that, and the other. Money, drug, blah, blah, blah. Because he was trying to get to his prostitute. But what happened with her was, she was trafficked, because of him, because of that dickhead. She was thrown, the very next day, I swear not, we knew all about this. She was thrown on a plane and sent to Russia, and she was tossed around and fucked up and down by these other people. Now, by the way, this isn't clever. This is not clever. That woman should have not been trafficked. In my mind, she should have been safe. But she was not safe because of that bastard of a plug. And and I met him a few times. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, he's like, I'm going to knife this guy. And, and he's like, but we found out a few months down the line that he was the biggest smackhead in town. And he was the big asshole dealer. And this other dealer, who he was supposed to be mates with, had his eyes opened wide, and he chucked half his stash, his gear, because of him. And he didn't, nobody was going to supply him. You know, so, you get something like. But then he got down to London. No, he got up to Scotland, and I believe that the people dealt with him up there, but that's another story. Anyway, we get back to the car. Seconds we got back to the car, we knew there was an issue, because we got back, and where was our escorts that would help? Well, they were gone. Why were they gone? They were called back to Birkdale. They were fobbed off, as they call it. They were sent off the other way. And what happened was, there'd been an intercom ringing in the. Now, I'm going to tell you another story about this intercom. There'd been an intercom ringing at the desk at Birkdale. They couldn't get to it, and they'd been pressing the bell and buzzing the intercom at the same time. Now, there was another intercom they could get to, and an emergency phone. Where did this emergency phone lead to? Blooming Liverpool. And they sent the guys from Liverpool. Why is this not being dealt with? They sent 100 cars up to Birkdale. No, I think they sent every car up in Birkdale. And my friend, who's the policewoman, and I was really gutted, because when I got to Birkdale in the unmarked police car, and I got out, and we had to go behind, and we had to get the gear out, and I had to put it in my this lad's jacket, and we just go around, and we had sacks of this gear, and it's like, oh dear, what are we going to do? I took what was mine, I'll just put it like that. But what are we going to do with all the gear? So what we had to do was, I had to say, look, I had to ring Mick. I had to ring Mick on the car phone. But what I didn't know was he'd pressed the wrong button in his car phone. So the car phone, the button he pressed on the car phone, belled the intercom. Oh no. So when he's saying, oh, I've got the gear, Tom, sorry, I've got the money, Tom. Have you got the gear? Is it supplied? Have you supplied it? Did you manage to fob the plug off? Well, that's going over the loudspeaker. Oh my gosh. Over the thing. The guy in the police station put 2 and 2 together. I mean, obviously he realised, and every person, and he's ringing Liverpool on another phone. He's ringing Liverpool on another phone, and wacka wacka, the doors start opening at Liverpool. The printers start going in Liverpool. Now back then they had computer bills. They couldn't just, as you fully well know, they had to pay for computers back then. They had to pay for computers and pay to print paper, and it was billed. So we were he was pulled in the police station at Churchtown, because they didn't say, they didn't pull him into Birkdale because he was a cop, and they didn't pull us either. So what I did was, I went into Birkdale police station and said, listen, I said, we got some shopping that we got to sort out. I've got, some shopping. I said, I'm going to put it in my car. And I said, whatever. I said, whatever you heard is a load of bollocks. So I sort of, I don't know, I kind of stuck up for him, really, because I was his mates. But mates don't do what mates do. And so he got in the car, straight back, and the minute they got back in, I got into my car and drove straight. I got into his car. Sorry, I didn't. I got in. I got into my car, and we drove up to the police station in Churchtown. And I got out of my car, and I just dumped his gear on the floor. And he was summoned, and I went into the police station as well. And he came out, and he says, "You're not getting the car." He jumped in his car and just screeched off. So that then. So obviously, I didn't sell him a car, but I nicked his supply, or a quarter of his supply, which obviously I'm not. I'm not. It's one of those things, isn't it? And obviously, it's one of them things. Now, a lot of people are into the crime shit, and we did a bit of work with police communications, and I used to help Mick out on certain jobs. I used to help the police break in and stuff like that. And there was one time, there was some noisy neighbours, shall we say.
Oh, is this when you turned the electric off?
No, that was a different time. No, there were noisy neighbours, and they weren't seeing to reason. Now, this was where the police, and still the police it's the council's job, not the police job, which everybody knows. So I just said, well, the policeman knocking on the door won't scare him off. So I said, see what we'll do. We'll send them a warrant. But then I thought, well, that won't do anything. So I got on the loudhailer. Now hear this. If you don't turn your racket down, we will, kind of thing. And that didn't really stop them. So what I then did was we did a loudness war. I said, listen, to the people at the class, listen, I says, when are you going to work? I said, right, because these people, they were kind of, they didn't really work, they didn't do much, they were just arsehole neighbours. Arsehole neighbours, right? Everyone's got an arsehole neighbour somewhere along the line. So what I did was I got a radio, put it on, left it playing, left it blaring. And then another thing I did was I got a CD player and I put on, that was it. I found out what records they didn't like. So I put all the records they didn't like, and it was challenged. And in the end, they thought, right, well, he's gonna carry on doing this, because I carried on. I went every time they were at work. I went and ended all these things. So they then came to an agreement that they would only play their music loud when they went to work. So that was the agreement. And it worked. Yeah. Now, obviously, we sort of didn't prepare this one, but wasn't there a guy who had like loads of wheelbarrows of money in Liverpool and someone was stealing off him, and in the end, didn't they give the wheelbarrows back? The greedy businessman. Yeah. So it was a greedy businessman who, know what happened was there was a greedy businessman, and there was a guy who was how can we put this? Homeless but not, right? But he was a bit of a nuisance kind of thing. The greedy businessman was a jerk. And he was one of the biggest businessmen in Liverpool. In fact, he had businesses all over. And to paint you the picture, he was a Pakistani. And his name was Grassel Hasid. Grassel Hasid, that was his name. They were all Hasids. Now, I knew the Hasids. I knew the whole family. And I knew this homeless bastard. Right? And this homeless guy was homeless. He literally lived the way he wanted to live, if that makes sense. He was homeless because he could be. Now, you've got to remember, this is in a time when homelessness wasn't really a problem. It was a situation. It was just a little teething problem. It wasn't a massive problem like it is today. And it was at a time when homeless people they sort of, people could be homeless, but there was a lot of resources for them. And this guy was living in a tent. Yeah, he was living in a tent, so to speak. And then he was just living out of doorways, he was just living on, but people hated him. Well, I say hated him, but they didn't, because he he stole from elderly and stuff like that. But he tried to change his ways. And in fact, he did change his ways. Because we found out he was a bit of an alky. He liked his alcohol, liked his liquor. And he was knocking around with the wrong crowd and all the rest of it. But anyway, there was this businessman, and he had a massive empire, and he hid all of his money underneath in a tunnel, and I'm not going to say where. I'm not going to say where it is because it's what can we say about it? It's, if you know where it is, you know where it is. It's not the Thomas what's his face. No, it's not the Eggshell tunnels. However, I've got a story about them as well. A bit of a paranormal tale if you're into that shit. It's not the Vampire Underground either. No, it's not. Well, it's near there. Near there, but there are a lot of tunnels in Liverpool. And anyway, these tunnels, there was a lot of money. And we're not just talking a few £1,000s. We're talking a few million. Now, this guy also had, in Scotland, in a cave in Scotland, another few £1,000,000. And all he did, and apparently this is what we were told, he had lorries moving his few £1,000,000 from Scotland to Liverpool and back from Liverpool to Scotland. And that's all he did. And he had people moving wheelbarrows full of this money, right? Well, this homeless kid, this beggar, this asshole of a beggar who knew how to get all these pennies. So what he did was he took 2 wheelbarrows and he took them to this trying to think, to this bus shelter, right? Now, he wasn't very far because criminals, if you're properly criminally minded, you will kind of think of where to not go with 2 wheelbarrows with a couple of £1,000,000 in. Now, he tried to buy his way out of it. And a friend of mine at the time was a policeman. And they saw this swagger person. Yeah. And they took him and his precious, and his, what he had, and they took him to Grassell Hasid's house, which was in, trying to think where it was now, because I've been to the house, and the house was massive. And I mean, oh crumbs, it was about, let's say the house was about 5 or 6 stories. It's now been reconverted into a block of flats, the house, because he'd moved to London. I mean, he's still got a mansion, but he had a really big house. I think it's a hotel. Now, one of his houses is a hotel in the centre of Liverpool. And the other of his other house has been reconverted. And then his other house, some footballer built. But anyway, they took him to this house. And they made him take the wheelbarrow back to the house. Not back from where he got it from. They made him take the wheelbarrow of all this money to the house. And the businessman, instead of saying, "Oh, shop him off to jail," this businessman, he did punish him. He did punish him because he made him work for him. He had to go to Scotland in a wagon and load sacks of money into a wagon. But he was given a mattress to sleep on. He was given food. He was given a cup of tea. And like I said, they couldn't just shop him to jail because they knew there was something wrong. They knew there was something wrong. And this businessman just sent him to work. But this businessman said, "If you ever do this again," he said, "it won't just be loading sacks of money." No way. And they show you everything, you know. Yeah. They literally show you everything.
One notification. 9:16 p.m.
Ooh, crumbs.
9:16 p.m. 8:7 PQRS 8 TUV. Mic trigger. Mic lock. Finish recording. Finish recording.